All right, welcome everybody to our NBA preview. See, we don't only talk about combat sports here on Fight Game Media. This is our basketball preview. We've talked about the NBA draft prior. We've talked about the home run derby. So now we're going to talk about the NBA season 21-22, the 75th anniversary season of the NBA. I was asking Andy and CJ. CJ's not even old enough for this to happen. But in 1997, they did the 50th anniversary team. It was a pretty big deal. I remember the discussions about who got left off that team. Dominique Wilkins was left off, and who should have been on it. But now, 25 years later, you only have 25 more spots, and I feel like in the last 25 years, the player depth even got more. So I feel like there's probably going to be more players in the last 25 years added. So Andy, you were telling me off the air that this is going to be a whole brand new list. Like they're just going to redo it from the start.
Yeah, they're looking to add just a completely new list. And like you were saying, over the last 25 years, only 25 more spots. And yeah, the depth of talent has just really increased in, the last 2 decades. And it's going to be really interesting to see who's included, who's left off. Obviously we have some surefire additions, LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, just to name a few, Tim Duncan.
Even guys who you wouldn't think about, someone like Jason Kidd, who won a title, who from the record books perspective is really, really added from I think from assists. And then at some point he was up there in the 3-pointers. Even you don't even think of him as a shooter, but even someone like Jason Kidd, who I don't think he made anybody's MVP list. I think he came in the top 5 a few times, but he is somebody who, when you compare against other guys, like he's going to be comparable. So this list is very interesting to me. Scott, do you remember when they did the top 50 list in 1997?
So I have a vague memory of it. I finally remember because I used to be a big fan of Scotty Pippen because he had the same name as me with Scott. So I was instantly drawn to him. He made the list, and he was the only person I cared about on the list, to be honest. But looking back at that list, it was really cool, especially back then, to think about it, because some of those guys are still going to be on this upcoming list, even when they make the new one. So it is a cool kind of retrospect to not only see who laid the foundation, but just give a little appreciation to the past too.
And I'm sharing the photo from the old list, and you have people on this list who are no longer with us, like Wilt Chamberlain and Moses Malone there. Thankfully, Bill Russell is still with us. I'm like looking at this list going like, who do you remove from that? I mean, Lenny Wilkins maybe as a player isn't, with some of these guys, but man, it's going to be a hard thing. Does Clyde Drexler still make the top 75 list? It's going to be insane. I can't wait for all the content, because in 1997, we had talk radio and newspapers. In 2021, we have websites and podcasts. So that's going to be content's going to be coming out of our ears about this. Okay, so we're not here just to talk about that, but I wanted to open with that. We're here to talk about the NBA season preview 21-22. And so I want to start with the champs. The opening photo was of Giannis. He finally overcame and is an NBA champion, and probably joins the pantheon of this top 75 team because of that. So Milwaukee finally overcomes. They win the title last year. They get through Atlanta and Brooklyn to get there, but they didn't have to face the Lakers on the other side. Thanks to injuries, the Lakers tried to sneak into the playoffs as a low seed, but ultimately they couldn't overcome the sneaky Phoenix Suns. Looking back, and we'll start with CJ, since we'll just kind of go in order here. CJ, Scott, and then Andy. How would you rank this Bucks team from last year versus our champs of yesteryear? The bubble Lakers, the Kawhi-led Toronto Raptors, the Warriors from the 3 championships, and then the Cavs in 2016. How did the Bucks match up with those guys, CJ?
Well, I think they don't feel like a super team like those Warriors did. And the Cavaliers had LeBron James, who was already a super duper star, and you had Kyrie Irving. I think they're definitely in the conversation with like all of those teams except for the Durant Warriors, because that's just a whole another level. And I remember when Durant went there and like either the uproar if you weren't a Warriors fan or if you were a Warriors fan, you were elated.
Yes.
Yeah. So definitely in the mix. I think I'd say they're better than the Kawhi Raptors, I think, but it's just so hard to kind of retroactively compare. But I don't think they don't belong. I think they're definitely in the mix of those teams.
Yeah, and the reason why I asked this question, and we'll get to Scott and then Andy next, is because last year was obviously a short year. I think it was 72 games versus the normal 82. The previous year was even shorter because of the pandemic and the bubble. That's why I called them the bubble Lakers. Like, I feel like when it comes to the difficulty, like that 2020 championship was probably just like so mentally exhausting. And I give credit to that Lakers team. I think when you have someone like LeBron, maybe a version of that Warriors run would have been mentally strong enough to handle that bubble as well. But that was probably the most difficult title of recent memory, just because of everything that everybody was going through. Milwaukee doesn't have to do it in the bubble, but it's not like we had fans all last year. So it was a little bit of a funky, different season. I think by the time the finals were there, we did have close to at least a full crowd of fans, but just a different year. So, Scott, you saw the 2020 bubble Lakers. You've seen the Warriors of the last 5 years. How do you compare the Bucks against those teams?
Man, I'm gonna be honest with you. I was actually really impressed with the Bucks as far as Giannis and Middleton in particular. And I think the way Drew Holiday played defensively, I think these Bucks can match up with a lot of these teams, probably outside of that just super squad Warriors team, which I don't think anybody's really competing with at full strength. But the Cavs team, I think they would smoke the Toronto team. I don't even think that would be close. I think they would destroy them. They have no answer for Giannis. And if they did, Middleton would probably have one of those incredible fourth quarters that he had during the finals. So I think they're a lot stronger than probably given credit for because of who they had. Because when they went through the Nets, you know, they didn't have Kyrie, then James Harden, and then the big toe incident. Everybody's saying they got lucky because of the toe. But
Katie's big old
I just
feet.
think they're a lot. Yeah, Katie's big old toes. But I think they're a lot stronger than given credit for because, I mean, we forget Giannis put up 50 in a closeout game. You know, that's not something that happens regardless of who you're talking about. 50 in a closeout game is incredible. So, yeah, I think they match up really well with just about everybody except for that Warriors team.
So, Andy, I'll slightly change the question. They lost PJ Tucker to the Heat. And then they didn't really bring anyone out that, you know, that would stand out to a casual fan. You know, they have a little bit more depth, I guess you could say. But are they good enough in the East to simply say, let's run it back? Like, let's take our team from last year. We lose PJ, who was defensively was fantastic for them, but let's run it back.
Yeah, you know, that's actually kind of what the narrative was about them going into last season was, are they good enough? You know, did they add the right pieces? You know, the Bogdanovich debacle where they lost out on him, couldn't really bring him in, where this season, I don't know if they're good enough to kind of just rest on that. I think that Brooklyn is going to be a real problem. And I think that Miami is going to be a real problem. And there are other teams that have gotten better. And this is probably the best Eastern Conference that I can remember in a while. So that they won their championship when they did, I think is incredible circumstances, especially after Giannis kind of doubled down and signed that Supermax extension with the Bucks, kind of committing to the city, and immediately he's rewarded. And now we're going to talk about him in a completely different way for the rest of his career. And you got to think that he is going to compete for championships. But we didn't necessarily think they were good enough at the beginning of last season. So I wouldn't really count them out either. This big three of Middleton, Holiday, and Giannis really did something special, and they know they can beat Brooklyn. It's just whether they can do it again or if Brooklyn's going to be at full strength.
All right, we'll talk about Brooklyn in a second because Brooklyn is the favorite. If you look at all the betting odds, Brooklyn is the favorite to win the championship, even with the Kyrie news, and we'll talk about Kyrie in a second as well. Well, let's go to the West, and I'll ask the same question. And again, we'll start with CJ. The Phoenix Suns are similarly running it back, but in a slightly different way. Chris Paul, Jay Crowder are kind of the vets. They're a year older. But Booker and Ayton, they haven't become the best versions of themselves yet. Are they good enough to simply run it back with what the season that they had last year?
I think they are. I think that as long as Booker and Ayton kind of play as good or better than they did in the last season, I think they could definitely get to the West Finals. Obviously, the West is very deep now with Clay's coming back to the Warriors. I don't know when, but I'm sure it's
probably around All-Star break time is what we're
Right.
hearing in the Bay Area.
Yeah, so they could make that push. The Lakers are stacked, and I still can see them getting right up there, even with all that. I just think that team's really good, and I think that yeah, it's Chris Paul, who I'm a huge fan of, and what he did in the playoffs and with that team, which just impressed me so much. So I think they can definitely be in the mix for sure.
All right, Scott, you saw a courtside view of this Phoenix Suns team when they beat the Lakers in the playoffs, which was really almost the crowning, right? Because people were like, Phoenix, is this a fluky season? You know, is it because of the pandemic where they can sort of take advantage? Devin Booker, awesome season. You know, Chris Paul is a year older, but so you saw them sort of take that level up against the Lakers. Do you see it as real, or do you see it as, well, the reason why they were able to do that is because the Lakers weren't at full speed?
I think it's a little bit of both. I don't know if they're quite that number 2 seed. You know, I don't know if we can count on them to be that top tier group every year. But I think from here on out, for the rest of Devin Booker's career in Phoenix, we can count on them to be a top 5 team in the West. I think that is solidified after this last year. I do think the injuries obviously played a part, but injuries are a part of the game. They happen on both sides, West and East, and that's just a part of the game. So I do think it was for real in that Phoenix is now going to be a perennial playoff team that can beat anybody. And if Ayton takes the steps that he needs to, they're a problem. Like they're just a problem. I just don't know if he's going to advance like the way Booker has. But yeah, I think they're a perennial playoff team from here on out as long as Booker is on that roster.
All right, Andy, similarly, you had a front row seat to seeing how good Phoenix could be. Do you sense that they're just going to be able to duplicate that this season?
I do. I think the window is still open, given that there's a bit of a vacuum in the Western Conference at the top with Kawhi Leonard's injury and the expectation that when he's back, the Clippers are going to be right back up at that same level. With him out, not really sure what we can expect from Paul George as the main guy. So I think Phoenix's window as that number 2 team, if like even as a number 1 team, we'll see also what the Jazz can do. But I think Phoenix can absolutely do it if Ayton does take that next step forward as an inside presence, and Booker continues to show his growth as a player. They could absolutely get back to the finals. I think that this Phoenix team was for real, and Chris Paul's leadership, especially locking him up, that we know he's going to be there going forward, and someone finally recommitting to him, I think is only going to help Phoenix's chance of getting back there as well.
Okay, so let's stay on the Lakers beat here. I'm going to share this for a few seconds here. Get a kick out of this.
There he is.
Russ. You got Russ. Now, let's talk about this Lakers team, Andy, and then I'll go back to you, Scott. So, Andy, big Lakers fan. How does this happen with you living in the New York area?
Oh, yeah. So I grew up in Buffalo, New York, where I'm a big sports fan, you know, Bills and Sabres. Let's go Bills. And I once asked my grandfather, hey, did we have a basketball team at any point? And he says, yes, but they moved to Los Angeles. And at the time, I was also a big Nick Van Exel fan. So I just kind of went all in with those Lakers teams. Did come to find out later that the Buffalo Braves became the Los Angeles Clippers.
Yes.
But by that point, it was far too late for me. So I've kind of stuck with it. But
Bob McAdoo, baby.
Yeah, a lot of fun runs in the early 2000s as a Laker fan really cemented me. Those Shaq and Kobe years, there was no looking back for me.
All right, so Scott also a LeBron fan. Scott, do you root for LeBron? Do you root for the Lakers, or are you just kind of like whatever team LeBron's on, I'm going to run with?
I'm running with the King. No matter what team the King's on, I'm running with the King.
All right, so both of you have close eyes on this team. They obviously added Russ Westbrook, added Carmelo, brought Dwight back, still have Rondo. It's like a 2014 All-Stars team. A question for Andy. Historically, Russ has needed the ball to be his most effective self. And when he and James Harden played together, Russ was a predictable player and not his best self.
Mm-hmm.
As we know, LeBron runs the show. And no matter what, no matter if he says he doesn't want to or not, he runs the show. Rondo also needs the ball. Can LeBron and Russell Westbrook play together is my question.
That I'm really curious to see myself as a Laker fan. I certainly hope so. And a lot of the talk around the Lakers is maybe with Russ on the team, LeBron's not going to have to take on such a load late in the season, or you have that energy guy or that work ethic guy to kind of fill that space at the same time. If LeBron's not going to be there, he's age 37 season, he's still a physical marvel, but Father Time is undefeated. With this Laker team in general, just so many question marks defensively. Their defensive identity is completely shifted with moving of KCP and Kyle Kuzma. Frank Vogel is a defensive-minded guy, and he's going to get hustle and heart out of Russ every night. But they were number one in defensive rating last year, kind of a little bit under the radar. I don't think a lot of people know that, and it didn't really necessarily shine through.
Anthony Davis might be the best defensive player in the league when he's playing 100%.
He's going to have to be, because they're expecting him at the 5 to kind of create that space for Russ and LeBron at the floor at the same time. And if he is, I think he's pretty much a lock for Defensive Player of the Year as well. So it kind of opens him up to do all those things he can do, protect the rim. I'm really anxious to see how it works. I think Anthony Davis is the X factor, though. They're really going to go as far as he's able to carry them right now.
All right, Scott, staying on the Lakers beat here. After last year's disappointing playoff exit, you guys wanted to defend that title. Rather than lean into the shooting and athleticism where the league has kind of gone, look at how the Suns kind of put their team together. The Lakers have actually gone the other way. They have one of the most talented big men in basketball in Anthony Davis, and like Andy said, I think he is going to play some 5 this year. He played the 5 against the Warriors when the Warriors went small in that play-in game to combat Draymond, and I thought that was a very impressive lineup. But they went for the battle-tested vets to play with LeBron. Are you worried that the age of the team and the possibility of injuries catching up to them, including the formerly invincible LeBron James, could be a problem for the team this season?
I do think the age can be a problem, and that's where Vogel's really going to have to put his coaching hat on. And the beginning of the season, we really got to monitor these minutes and make sure, like LeBron, there should be no reason, especially these first 2 months, LeBron should ever play more than like 35 minutes a game. There's no reason for it when you have this much depth and this much talent. Carmelo Anthony, he's a guy that, was kind of not a throwaway, but he's, an extra piece, and he can go off for 20, 25 any given night if he catches
he can
fire.
also play the stretch 4 as well for you guys.
Absolutely. And that's another thing. He can knock down the shot. And I think that's where LeBron's intelligence is really going to shine through, because I also see LeBron playing a little bit more of either that high post, mid-range, or AD playing that high post, and maybe LeBron going low post and seeing how teams match up with them. If they put LeBron in low post and let him work on the block, are they going to put a bigger guy on him, or are they going to put a bigger guy on AD? Because then AD can go to work at that high post. So they have options, and I think Russ is going to get a lot of touches, and it's going to be Russ time whenever LeBron goes to the bench. I can see Russ being the main guy with that entire second string. That way Russ gets his fix, he gets his shots, he can have the ball for like the entire end of the first, like the middle of the second when LeBron normally gets his rest. So I can see this working out, But Frank Vogel is really going to have to coach this year. He's not going to be able to just rest on his talent. He's going to have to coach.
All right, let's move on to the West and kind of the rankings here. Lakers and Suns, I think, just about on everybody's list are the top two teams out West. And CJ, get ready to come up first. I'm gonna break down some of the other teams that could come up here. We have Dallas, who went 42-30 last year. They got a new coach in Jason Kidd. Got the further evolution of Luka Doncic, and maybe if they cross their fingers hard enough, a return to form of Kristaps Porzingis. You have the Denver Nuggets, who went 47-25 last year. MPJ became a really good player when Murray went down. You look at his splits from when Murray went down, and he really became a go-to scorer for them and a great shooter. Murray will be back hopefully before the playoffs start. Around April will be the year mark for his return for his ACL injury to heal. And you still have the Joker as the reigning MVP. Golden State, who interestingly enough, when it comes to the finals odds, have the fourth best odds in the NBA, the betting odds. I don't understand that at all, even being a Warriors fan. Golden State was 39-33 last year. Klay is coming off of 2 injuries, one to his knee, one to his Achilles. So that's a question mark there. Targeting around the All-Star break. Steph Curry had a return to form last season after being hurt the majority of the bubble year. James Wiseman in his second year after a disappointing rookie season. They brought Andre back. Otto Porter and Jordan Poole will have to play big roles this season. Jordan Poole in preseason looked amazing. And there could be a trade in the midseason depending on what's out there for Kuminga or Wiseman, because if things come together for the Warriors, this could be a year where they have to go after it because Steph going to be 34, Draymond and Klay in their early 30s. Not a lot of time for them to continue to play at such a high level. Clippers, this one's all about Kawhi's knee, and it doesn't sound like anybody knows anything about his knee except for Kawhi,
Shocker.
and he's not telling. The Utah Jazz, the best team in the West last year, 52-20. They live and die with the three-pointer and Gobert protecting the middle, which is a fantastic regular season plan until the playoffs screw it up. Donovan Mitchell took another step forward last year. He looks he's tremendous. I love watching him play ball. Okay, so those are the 5 teams that I added to this list. CJ, is there any team that you would throw in there that I missed? And then give me your pick out of the West.
I think you hit all of them. Portland, I just don't see being. I can't see them being any better than they were last year, and they often get thrown in. They were getting thrown in a lot with 76ers trades when Ben Simmons was, that whole fiasco was going on.
Well, don't worry, we'll talk about that.
Yeah, it's tough to pick who I think will go, because the chalky pick is the Lakers because of the talent they have.
Sure.
But I don't know. I feel like every second or third game, Davis is like limping off the court with like a minor ankle injury. So that's kind of scaring me away from that pick. I kind of want to go with Phoenix to run it back. I really want to pick Dallas, but unless they make a move and, kind of deal Porzingis and get something back and maybe upgrade somehow, I can't see them getting to the West Finals, but I'm gonna go Phoenix. I think. The Phoenix or the Warriors, but if I had to pick, Phoenix is my West pick.
All right, Scott, do the Lakers get back?
Yeah, I'm going with the Lakers, man. I think if they can stay healthy, we can manage these minutes throughout the year. I just don't see a team that can beat them. And I said the same thing last year, and obviously injuries are going to play a part again, but yeah, I'm going with the Lakers again. I think they're going back to the finals.
Andy, you agree?
I do have them winning the West, but I want to say that if anyone could possibly take advantage of those same circumstances that the Suns did last year, missing AD, Kawhi, Jamal Murray on their way, I think it's the Jazz. I just think they're playing pretty good ball. They're kind of in that Milwaukee situation they were last year that, until you do it in the playoffs, you're kind of an afterthought. So people might overlook them. I think if the things break their way, they could take advantage of those same things. If Kawhi didn't play in that whole series last year, they make it to the West Finals instead of the Clippers. So I would probably take the Jazz, but I do ultimately have the Lakers coming out of the West because of the talent. And I just think they'll find a way to balance enough to get out of a Clipperless Western Conference.
So I'm going to pick the Suns, and we'll see. Scott fell off. We'll get him back. I'm going to pick the Suns only because I'm a little bit worried about the Lakers' injury health. Not that I'm worried about LeBron. We'll have a deeper question about this in a little bit, but just the mileage. Last year and in 2019, he got hurt in both seasons, and he's not someone who normally had to sit out, longer than a couple of games because of injury. So those two out of the last 3 years, he got hurt. That worries me a little bit. And for that reason, I'm gonna take the Suns along with CJ here. All right, let's talk about the East. Scott's coming back. I think he went inside, so this may be a little bit of a different view for us and Scott here. Let's see if he jumps back in. We'll sort it out.
Sorry.
Okay, so let's talk about the East here. So, obviously, I think Brooklyn and Milwaukee are the top contenders. The betting odds have Brooklyn as the favorite of every single team in the NBA. Again, even with Kyrie, sort of persona non grata in Brooklyn right now. And so I chose 4 teams who I thought had the best chances to possibly upset one of those 2 teams. But they all have major, major question marks. Philadelphia went 49-23 last year. This is all dependent on Ben Simmons. He wanted to leave. He wanted to get traded. He held out. It did not work out for him because they called his bluff. And they said, hey, buddy, just, we'll see what we can do. But, we're not going to take 10 cents on the dollar for you. We've invested a lot in you. And running it back to me without making a change seems to be a little bit of a fool's errand, but we'll see. I imagine they have ideas on what they can do to switch things up. Miami went 40-32. They picked up Kyle Lowry. They still have Victor Oladipo if he can ever get healthy. They also picked up PJ Tucker. So they're leaning more towards like what the Lakers did in adding these vets to go with, Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, young up and coming, star. So they're sort of in the same situation where one injury to either of those guys could really derail their entire season. The Hawks 41-31 last year. I think this is all about Trey taking it to that next level. And is he that guy? And then lastly, I added Boston, even though they had a pretty disappointing season last year, 36-36. New coach, new point guard, deeper supporting cast. We'll see what happens there. I'm not too confident. One team I didn't mention is the team that CJ actively roots for, which is the Chicago Bulls. CJ, would you add the Chicago Bulls to that list?
As much as I'd want to, I can't see them getting far enough to be like an upset sort of team to upset one of the top teams. And I really, really, really would like them to, but the question mark on the defense with the starting 5, you've got Lonzo, Levine, Patrick Williams, who is a good defensive player, but it's only his second year. You've got Vucevic and DeRozan, which doesn't scream lockdown defense to me. And that's kind of why I doubt that they could. But I mean, the only thing you can say is injury breaks. Maybe they could get far, but I don't have them just quite in that tier, but the one directly below.
Okay, so let's actually do our picks here. So we'll stay with you, CJ. Do you think it's Brooklyn and Milwaukee? Or do you think it's either of those other 4 teams? Who would you pick coming out of the East to play the Phoenix Suns, as you predicted?
I've got Brooklyn because, like we mentioned before, Kevin Durant's feet weren't so big, they probably would have won the title last year. I remember watching that shot, and me and my friend, we lost our mind, and then we saw the replay of his very large foot on the line. That was devastating. Yeah, I just Brooklyn, even if they don't have Kyrie Irving, it's still James Harden and Kevin Durant as your top two players. That's hard to stop. Not to say Milwaukee won't put up a fight, but I can't bet against Brooklyn in this case.
All right, Scott, who are you taking in the East?
Man, I can't take Brooklyn. I don't have faith in Brooklyn, man. I don't have
Just
faith in
admit
James
it. You don't
Harden.
like KD. This is an anti-KD take. This is what this is.
Nah, I rock with KD. And listen, I have to say, last year's playoff, especially that series with Milwaukee, KD showed out, man. He did literally everything he physically could besides shrink his foot. That's the only thing physically he couldn't do to win that game or that series. But I actually think it's going to be Milwaukee. I think they go back to the finals. I can't bet against Giannis after what he did last year. The chips were all against him. He just came off 2 back-to-back MVPs, and he was still able to not only get back to the finals, but he was able to be dominant in the finals. So I think Milwaukee goes back. And as far as the Chicago thing, I think they're going to be competing for that top 4 spot this year. But yeah, I got Milwaukee going back to the finals.
So Andy, what about you? Who's coming out of the East?
I really wish I could make a better case for someone besides Brooklyn. I'm going to try with the Miami Heat. I really like what they did as far as bringing in who they brought in. You know, all 3 of those guys, Kyle Lowry, PJ Tucker, and Markieff Morris, all championship players, all kind of know what it takes to get to that next level. You add that to a team with an absolute psychopath in Jimmy Butler. They brought back Duncan Robinson, which I thought was a great signing. He's going to have the green light to shoot. And then I haven't even mentioned Bam Adebayo or Tyler Hero. They have Udonis Haslem back for his 18th season as a glue guy. Filling that Jared Dudley role. I think that Miami, when they made the finals in the bubble, they were the 5th seed, and last year they were quietly ushered out of the playoffs by the Bucks as the 6th seed. I think now they're easily a top 3 team in the East and are going to have an easier time, or at least an easier path to advancing in the Eastern Conference with these moves. I think that Kyle Lowry especially is really kind of the steady hand you want coming out of the East. But ultimately, I would pick Brooklyn. Just it kind of goes hand in hand with my MVP pick.
I think I would agree with you. I was trying to look. I think there is an opportunity for a team in the East to take that next step. I don't see it unless the Heat have like the perfect injury luck. If they have the perfect injury luck, I think they're going to be very, very competitive. And because they're just a grinding kind of team, they're going to make things hell for the opposition. Without Kyrie, that's definitely a problem. Now we'll see, right? Because this pandemic is ever evolving, and just because and Andy, you can tell us more about sort of why the situation is that it is. It's very similar in San Francisco, where an employee needs to be vaccinated if they are working in the city of San Francisco. So this is why Andrew Wiggins had to get vaccinated in order to play his home games. Similarly, Kyrie can only play the road games, but Brooklyn just said, dude, we're not going to even mess with this. Either you get vaccinated and you come back, or you can sit on the sidelines until things change. Explain that scenario from the New York perspective.
Yeah, I mean, in New York, same thing as San Francisco, like you mentioned. To work in the city, you need to be vaccinated. And with Kyrie, I hope that he does come around because his team would certainly need him. I would imagine if you're on that team, if you're James Harden, are you not furious at Kyrie? They've said all the right things publicly, but if you're Kevin Durant, who's stuck by him publicly, are you not furious at him at the idea that he's kind of the one who brought them all together and really the architect of this team? And I do think that Brooklyn has done exactly what they need to do. You can't have a guy coming only and playing the road games. And now you're just basically telling Kyrie Irving, like, what? Oh, I'll meet you there. He's not exactly the most reliable guy to begin with. And so now we're expecting him to just show up at road games away from the team.
Right.
Because he says he will.
He took a lot of games off last year, right? For his own
exactly
mental health reasons or his family reasons or whatever. So
And I just think that Brooklyn absolutely needed to come out and make it clear that they had, while he's going through whatever he's going through, or finding out whatever he needs to find out, that he just can't be a part-time player. I think it's also a good message to everyone who is showing up on the team and kind of, we're going to move forward. And if he wants to be part of this, let's hope.
So that Brooklyn is still going to be my pick. But look, they are also a heavy veteran team. KD is, he's I consider him to be the best player in the NBA right now. I worry a little bit about him having to do so much last year coming off of that injury. Blake Griffin, he sort of has revitalized his career as this like small ball center. In the regular season, it's going to work. In the playoffs, he's going to get pushed around. That's kind of what happened. Patty Mills is going to be able to come in, but I like him so much better as a reserve than as someone who they're going to depend on now that Kyrie is out. Like as a reserve, he's kind of the perfect reserve for this team. Aldridge, he had to retire last year, Paul Millsap. So they have a really old bench, and it's really going to be about KD and James Harden. Now, you can't have a better twosome in the NBA than those guys from a scoring offensive perspective. I'm going to bet on them, but is more a bet on KD. I think Giannis is going to be just as good as he was last year. I just think Brooklyn's going to be a little bit better. And now let's move on to some individual type of talk. Rookie of the year. I'm very intrigued because this was a rookie class that I studied a good deal because the Warriors had a high pick. But who are you guys looking at for possibilities for rookie of the year? And CJ, we will start with you.
I kind of have a bias for Josh Giddey in OKC because he is Australian, but it's hard to look past Cade Cunningham. And I've lost the name. The guy that plays for Houston.
Jalen Green. Jalen Green.
Yeah. Was he the one that grabbed that ball that was going out and he jumped like
20 feet in the air, snatch it out of midair? Yeah.
That was like how Reggie jumps into the ring on Raw, but like there wasn't a trampoline. Yeah, they're kind of my main three. I didn't study these rookies as much as I did last year, but the stuff I've seen from Cade, from Green, and from Giddey, I've been impressed. I'd probably go with Cade if I had to pick.
All right, Scott, what do you think?
I like Suggs. I think Suggs is going to be right up there with Cade. I think those two are going to be neck and neck as far as who's going to be able to make the most impact. I do like Jalen Green as far as just being a contributor to the team. But when you talk rookie of the year, I think it's going to be a two-headed race, at least right now, Suggs and Cade.
Andy?
My pick's going to be Jalen Green. I think that Houston, it's pretty much the Jalen Green show right now. I don't really know what they're going to go for. And similarly in Detroit, it's going to be the Cade Cunningham show. So I think we're kind of looking at a two-player race. Green has come out and said, I didn't get to go number one overall, but I got to my preferred destination. So now I want to go get rookie of the year. I think he will. I don't think Houston's really going to do much to stand in his way. It's going to be a long season for the Rockets. So if there's any way that this young player can bring their fan base some excitement, I think he's going to just have the green light to do what he can and hopefully steal a few games here and there.
I like all of your suggestions. The one, if Orlando had a little bit of a better team, I think Suggs is going to be a pretty dynamic player. I just worry that their team's going to be so bad. The one person I want to see and who I think is going to have a really good year, though, it won't be these glory, 20 points per game stats, is Scott's namesake, Scotty Barnes. Like I want to see what he does because he's kind of like a utility knife basketball player. They're going to have him play all kinds of different positions, especially on defense. And, the one thing is that we'll see about his shooting, but he's the one who I'm actually really interested to see play. I mean, I'll probably go with Jalen Green too, just because he's going to have the opportunity to probably shoot whenever he wants to shoot. So hopefully that works out for him. All right, let's talk about MVP. So If I'm looking on the betting odds here for MVP, we have Luka Doncic as the favorite, Kevin Durant, Joel Embiid, Giannis, Steph Curry, Dame Lillard, Jokic, and LeBron fill out the odds. James Harden is right there, and Trae Young as well. What do you guys think about MVP? To me, MVP is really about the narrative of the season and how you can get your story told. The fact that Kevin Durant has one MVP is kind of an interesting narrative to me. The fact that LeBron has mentioned that, there are other years where he could have added to that MVP cabinet that he lost. That is an intriguing story, I think, as well. Giannis, if he's able to bring the Bucks back to the title, that is an interesting story. So let's actually go from reverse order. Andy, we'll start with you. Who is your MVP pick for this year?
Yeah, I kind of alluded to it earlier, but I'm going to take one of the lower end of the odds spectrum that you filled out, and I'm going to take James Harden, and for the narrative reason of, this isn't 40 points per game James Harden anymore. He's going to have to bend his game to what they need from him out of Brooklyn. And I think for them to be truly special, it's going to revolve around him doing just that. And if he can show that he can change his game and adapt to Brooklyn and do what they need to do to win, no one has more on the line in that grand Brooklyn Nets experiment than James Harden. And I think that's really going to be a motivating factor. And I know it's going to be difficult to get those votes on a roster with
AD.
Kevin Durant, but I think that's how special he's going to be this season. So my pick is James Harden.
All right, Scott, what are you thinking?
Man, Luka Doncic, man, I don't see how he can have another year, another season like he had carrying that team, which didn't improve at all. And they still have Porzingis, who's just being 7-3 and nothing else. If he can have another season like that and they can get to the playoffs and they can be a 4 seed-ish, if they can do that, I don't see how you can really vote for anybody else. The only other person I can think of, I think Embiid's going to be right there in the mix too again. So I'm going with Doncic, and Embiid would be my dark horse.
All right, CJ. Zach LaVine as a dark horse. What's going on here?
I want it so bad. Similar to what Scott said, if Dallas get to a 3 seed or by some chance a 2 seed, and it's just Luka being Luka Magic, like, it again, hard to bet against him, hard to not vote for him. He's probably going to be my pick to win MVP, but if Durant doesn't get injured and he's lights out and the Nets are a 1 seed and he's just having a career year, then he's probably my secondary pick. But I thought Luka might win it last year, but last year was a weird season, and I'm all in on Luka winning MVP this season.
Yeah, Dallas is interesting. They had a little bit of the situation with Haralabos. How do you pronounce his name? Is that
Haralabob
right?
Vulgaris?
Yeah, Haralabob, whatever. They had that situation where seemingly he got maybe blamed for some stuff. I don't know. Mark Cuban seems to run an interesting ship, but they made some changes, and we'll see if those changes actually help. I think the Jason Kidd thing should benefit for a year or two. I think he always has some influence early on. And historically, I mean, he was the LeBron babysitter in the 2008 Olympic team. Like, there's the story from back in the day with Woj where, I'm sorry, not 2000, it was 2008 or 2012. I don't remember which one, but, LeBron had a lot of people with him and maybe wasn't seeing eye to eye with the situation. And Jason Kidd, they were like, dude, you got to get him. And it's like, okay, I listened to Kidd. He's my vet. I'm good. And so he's got that influence with those guys. And so I think it'll play off at least this first year. It should help. I just worry about Kidd there long term. And I'm someone who's a really giant Jason Kidd fan. I was watching his games at Cal, and I've met him. He's actually come into my office because one of my colleagues knows him decently well. So he seems like a very nice guy. Obviously has a kind of a shady past, but I think he'll have some effect on Luka. So that could be what Scott was kind of saying. Is like, if they get a few extra wins here and they make a move, that could be Luka's year. I'm going to stay KD because going back to the narrative, they could write it out as Kyrie's gone, who steps up. Now, your James Harden pick is probably the similar mentality. What I found interesting is they said last season who was the alpha dog of that team, and a few people said that James Harden was the team leader, not KD, not Kyrie Irving. I found that very interesting because you don't really see James Harden as that guy, but he was that guy. I think KD is going to be able to pick up the slack, some of the slack from Kyrie offensively. And it's never bad when you have three probable Hall of Famers on the court at the same time, right? But sometimes the way that you play in that scenario is your turn, my turn, your turn. And it's not really fluid because everyone kind of has to get their stuff. This could actually help both Harden and KD's efficiency numbers in that there's just more space, there's more focus and more attention to get them the basketball in the right opportunities. So I'm picking KD. I think this is possibly going to be his year. And I just worry that he got worn down last year, and we'll see if that is the case. All right, last little segment here, and I'll ask all of you the same question about the major themes for this year. Okay, Scott, you have your crystal ball. How does this Ben Simmons situation play out in Philadelphia?
Oh God. He's got to get traded at this point. I mean, I don't see, with everything Embiid has said and everything that's been said, I don't see how he can go back there. Where he gets traded to, me personally, if I'm doing the crystal ball and I get to kind of decide, I would love to see him in Portland and then somehow figure out a way to keep Dame Lillard. I don't think CJ McCollum is the answer. I think as long as they keep those two together, there is a ceiling that they have already hit, and they're keep hitting their head there. Now they're at the point where they're not even hitting that ceiling anymore. So I think Ben Simmons to Portland would probably be the most beneficial thing for everyone involved. It saves Dame from bringing the ball up. Ben Simmons can be in a new environment. I think the Western Conference would be a lot of fun for him. I think he'd be able to do well there. He can play a little bit of big man over there for a little while, and he can bring he can bring the ball up. An excellent passer, a great defensive player. I'd love to see him in Portland, and I think that would be a great spot for him.
Him and Draymond could play against each other and go for who is going to shoot the least out of those two guys when they guard each other. All right, CJ, what do you think's going to happen, Ben Simmons?
Yeah, I think he has to get traded at this point. The Australian media, because Ben Simmons is like half Australian, they're really tearing him a new one. I just get on my Apple News every day, like just all these sports outlets just going after him. It's kind of feel bad for the guy. Like I think there's a lot more to it than just, passing up the dunk. Like I think there's mental stuff there. But regardless, I think he 100% gets traded. I don't know where. I kind of think he should go to a team, not Orlando, but a team similar to Orlando who just aren't going to be contenders, but he can kind of just get better in a bad team and make it his team, because there was a bit of a power struggle with him and Embiid in Philadelphia, and I think Sacramento, Houston, Orlando, like something like that. I don't know if he'd go to like a kind of contending team right now. There was a Golden State talk, but I couldn't see that. But he's definitely, I can't see him in Philadelphia by the trade deadline.
All right, Andy, a little bit of the same question, but a little bit of a wrinkle to it, which is, did he plummet his own trade value by dealing with this in the offseason the way that he did? Or do you still think there is some value there for other teams to go, okay, like we're still going to give you something? Because it doesn't look like Philadelphia is going to budge here anytime soon.
He didn't do himself any favors, but this really all comes back to both Daryl Morey and Doc Rivers and Joel Embiid kind of throwing him under the bus. I really think that's when this all became irreparable, and it's not a matter of if he's traded, it's when. I see a couple teams out there. The talk is always, what is the best player you could theoretically get back for Ben Simmons? And we've kind of settled on this kind of second tier, CJ McCollum, Malcolm Brogdon, kind of, solid players, maybe borderline all-stars, but not necessarily that kind of return on potential that Ben Simmons has with his age and his talent. I ultimately am going to predict that he ends up in Sacramento. I think that they would be able to. Daryl Morey is trying to fleece somebody, because that's how Daryl Morey works. He wants to win a trade. He's not going to feel like he's won a trade until he finds somebody like Sacramento who might decide to give up on Tyrese Halliburton or De'Aaron Fox, which would be crazy.
Ooh.
But I mean, this is Sacramento, so I think that it's probably going to end up, especially trading him out of the conference. I think Indiana, if he goes in the East, because I think Malcolm Brogdon would be that kind of return for them. But yeah, it's a matter of when. But I think that Doc Rivers, especially after that loss, I know it was a tough loss, but that was pretty blatant of, can you win a championship with Ben Simmons? And I don't know, that's really tough. So I don't think Ben did much to help his case over the summer, but I think damage was already done.
I mean, I agree with all of you guys about he needs to be traded. I just don't I'm going to be interested in the timing, because if you're Philly and he plays and he's not playing well, then the leverage goes to the teams trading with you. If he does play well, the leverage could possibly swing more towards your side. But then you may also talk yourself into the idea that you figured out something with him, and that he could, because talent level wise, when it comes to just ability on the basketball court, he's still in the top 25, top 30, especially as an athlete. Now the shooting thing is frustrating, but I think it's also a bigger thing about professional sports when it comes to the mental part of the game. Like, we've heard Kevin Love talk a lot about being depressed, and like, imagine playing an NBA game in front of 20,000 people when you're dealing with a depression issue, or you're dealing with a fear of whatever it is. So for Ben's sake, I do hope that he resolves whatever this is. In baseball, it would be the yips, Steve Sachs thrown from second base, and all of a sudden, the throw's 50 feet and he can't hit the guy in the glove. Like, I'm sure it's something related to that. For his sake, he's still so young and he's still so talented. I hope he figures it out. It's probably not going to be in Philly, though. Okay, so next major theme, we'll come back to Kyrie. How does this Kyrie situation play itself out? He could also be traded to a Texas team or a Florida team where maybe the pandemic doesn't exist as much as it does in some of these other states. So we'll start with you, Scott. What do you think happens here with Kyrie Irving?
I think what ends up happening is he holds out for as long as he can, and then I think he ends up getting the vaccine. I personally think he's going to end up getting the vaccine. I mean, he's about to turn down a 4-year extension, 200 mil or 196 million. I see him sticking to his morals, but for how long? That's not only that a lot of money to turn down, but this is a big opportunity in his career, and we know how important it is, because that's why he wanted to put this whole thing together. So I ultimately see him giving in eventually and getting the vaccine, so that way he can travel with the team, because like you said, they already said they're not going to work with him on the half and half, and I agree with that scenario. I think it needed to be all in or not in at all. So yeah, I think he ends up getting the vaccine, and we see him on the Nets by the time playoffs come.
Agree with that, Andy?
No, I honestly think that we have probably seen the last of Kyrie Irving in the NBA, if you really want my opinion. I think he walks away from this. I think he is dug in. I really just don't know if it's a matter of principle for him. Well, those are really important to him, and I don't really know how much he loves basketball. We've seen him kind of dip in and out on the team at various points for his own well-being. And if that's the case, I hope he does take that time for himself. I don't want to sound like it's but I just think with him walking away, I really just don't see a resolution to this, at least not while he's on the Nets. And I just don't know if they would trade him or find a willing partner. He has threatened to retire if traded. So that really kind of nukes any leverage that Brooklyn might have. And if it was, I think he probably would have come around by now if he was going to get it. So I think we've just only seen the beginning of this.
So I want to touch on this appropriately and responsibly. I want to ask Scott here. There have been athletes who have sort of, for social justice reasons, put their, like you said, morals or what they believe in ahead of the sport. Muhammad Ali is probably the most famous one. Without he was not going to go to the Vietnam War, and he lost 3 years of his career, and he couldn't get licensed. It's actually ridiculous if you think about it. If you go back to that time frame, early 70s, and Colin Kaepernick is another one. He stood for something that he believed in. Even though the NFL is trying to be the babyface now, they weren't, and they still aren't, because he's not on a team. Kyrie, it seems like he's positioning himself, or maybe this is just the fans positioning him as this type of athlete whose social, reasons outweigh the career reasons. I personally don't see Kyrie in that same light. I think his reasons for doing this are a little hollow. I think I'm also biased because of all the flat earth nonsense that he spewed. But like, what do you see? Do you see him as, for his cause, and that's good enough? Or do you see him as a little faulty in his reasoning?
I think he's a little faulty in his reasoning, and you really touched on it. It's because of his past reasoning and his past, the things he said in the past, and his past quote unquote days off that he's taken. And I'm one for mental health, because you got to take care of yourself. That's the most important thing. You got to make sure everything up here is right, or nothing else on you is going to be right. But some of the stuff that he says, and he really stands behind, I just don't know if I can rock with it. And I can't put this in the same category as what Colin Kaepernick was doing, or what Muhammad Ali was doing, or even what the NBA was doing with Black Lives Matter in the bubble.
Right.
Like, I can't even put that in this same category, because it's important, but this is really his battle. I mean, we've seen Andrew Wiggins stand up against it, and he was like, but you know what? I'm going to give into this, because I see what I can do for my family with this type of money, and what my team is dependent on me. So I'm going to do this, and hopefully I'm good with it. So we've seen people hold out, but then they're like, man, I have other people depending on me. This isn't about me. I think it's really selfish. And I know people may not like that, and I may come off as a bad guy for saying that, but you got a lot of people depending on you when you put this together, and now you're the one that's really holding it back. So I don't really rock with the way this stands, and I don't think he should be viewed in that same light at all.
All right, CJ, last word on Kyrie.
Scott put it very nicely. Like, everything you said, I agreed with. It's not the same at all as Ali or Kaepernick. I feel like when he says a lot of stuff when he's being interviewed or whatever like that, and I kind of don't know what he's actually saying a lot of the time. Like, I feel like there's been a lot of times where he will say like, yeah, like, this isn't how it's supposed to be, or like, you wouldn't understand, or it's hard to explain, but it's like, we'll explain it, and then he just kind of doesn't. I think it's selfish as well, and it would be frustrating for his teammates, because I think all three of those stars on the Nets is not a guaranteed title, but the closest thing to it in the league. I think it's selfish, but All
right, last two questions. We'll make this like the quick answer. Two more, and we'll start with Andy. Zion, at the end of this year, is he still in New Orleans?
Yes, I mean, he'll be in New Orleans as long as he's signed there. I think he's going to remain loyal, at least sign one extension with New Orleans and kind of give them the benefit of the doubt there. But I think if it's been a really rocky start, and I don't see them improving at all this season. So I think it's going to be kind of the same situation. We start over. Another coach, David Griffin, kind of coasting on those titles he won with LeBron. I kind of always thought that, but and New Orleans, they can't stop running off generational talents. Chris Paul, Anthony Davis, is Zion Williamson going to be part of that? So I think he'll be there at least one more round.
I kind of even wonder if they're going to have a franchise in the next 5 years. Scott, what do you think? Zion?
Yeah. Oh, my bad.
No, go for it.
Yeah, I think Zion will be there. You're not going to get anything remotely. We think people aren't going to get their fair thing for Ben Simmons. You won't get anything remotely close to Zion Williamson for whatever you get back. So, because he could be a generational talent. So no, I don't see him going anywhere.
CJ.
I'm going to zag here, and I'm looking forward to seeing Zion play for the Knicks.
Oh,
So I think Zion is the most fascinating sort of player that no one's really talking about right now. Like, he's got this foot injury, and we'll see what's up with his foot. But I think there is a risk for any team who wants to go after him, because I do think there's value. It's probably going to be lots of picks and all this, but gosh, I just don't know enough about him as a player who really he's still so young, so you don't know, like, does he really want it? Who knows? Like, he's such a young guy, but man, if you put him in the right place, woo, that is some untapped talent there that he could just blossom. So I kind of am leaning with CJ more so in the hopeful thing of, like, let's just get him out of there and let's get him, New York. I'm all for anybody going to New York. Like, we need the Knicks to be good. That's my opinion. Okay, last thing, and this is I'm actually going to save Andy for last year. But CJ, back to you. We have to end with LeBron. How much does he have left in the tank?
I think he's got enough for one more championship, which goes against everything I've said before. But I think, like, I could see him going all the way if the Lakers remain without injury. I think that's how much he's got left.
Scott, this is your guy. What has he got left? What is he, age 38?
37.
38?
37.
Oh, 37. So he must be 37 going on 38, right? Is that right?
Yeah.
So I think he's got enough left for his son to come into the NBA and him to catch a lob from his son.
That would be so awesome.
I think he's got enough left to make it that far to just catch one lob from his son. And he might retire at halftime of that game if it happens in the first half. But I think he's got one more good run. And I think that's why Russ was here to maybe extend this a couple more years. But I think he's got one more great season. I think last year was a great season before he got hurt. I think he's got one more like that before we really start to see a little bit of, like, not a little bit, we see a steady decline in him. But one more strong season, but he'll be able to play until Bronny gets there.
All right, and the reason why I saved Andy is because Andy, being a Lakers fan, he saw where Kobe started to drop. And Kobe, being as savvy as a scorer that he was still able to keep his points high enough to where you could go, oh, well, he's still playing well, but it's just all of the other things kind of fell off, like defensively, shooting percentage, efficiency, like those things started to drop. But because he's Kobe Bryant, he was still able to score the basketball. So you saw Kobe kind of get old. Mm-hmm. And LeBron is a little bit of a different athlete, and he's even more of a freak than Kobe was. What are your thoughts in having seen that happen to Kobe, and what you expect from LeBron? Because LeBron's going to end his career in LA from what it looks like.
I agree with that. I think he'll stay in LA. I do love the Bronny aspect of things. I'd love to see that, and wherever he ends up signing, I hope it's somewhere like Indiana or something. The Kobe situation was frustrating because they gave him a huge extension as basically a thank you for being Kobe Bryant. Yes. And that really tied them up financially. It was really just the Kobe Bryant show. And then he hurt his Achilles. And that's when we had those, you see that lineup of Robert Saker and all those guys that couldn't believe that was a Lakers starting roster.
Heard it against the Warriors and shot the free throws.
That's right. That's right. He did shoot those free throws. Sometimes you just have to go shoot some free throws, I think is the quote. So LeBron's in a little bit of a different situation. I think first we have a full off season for LeBron. He didn't have that after the bubble. He was clearly worn down. Anthony Davis was clearly worn down. And he is a physical marvel. I think he is going to surprise the hell out of some people with what he is still capable of. And if he is really able to kind of go at second gear for the most of the season before he really turns it on before the playoffs, that's only going to benefit the Lakers as a franchise. And it's he is kind of, we're waiting for that, but we also see these things like Tom Brady's threatening to play until 55 now. We're seeing players kind of have these extended primes. If anyone was capable of having it, it's LeBron James.
I am going to say that LeBron is going to be his own worst enemy, in that, like Scott had mentioned, they really, really need to limit his minutes. And, as long as they're in the top 4 seeds in the West and they have, home court for that first round and they're in favorable situations, I think he's still going to be excellent. I think they'll be in great position. But if he sees himself as needing to chase maybe an MVP or needing to be on the court so that they get the first seed, I think that could actually be detrimental. But I think what would actually make him feel better is if AD was a little bit more reliable, because AD is such a fantastic player. And, then LeBron have a little bit more confidence. Like, okay, I don't have to play. Like, theoretically, LeBron should sit every 6 or 7 games. Like, he doesn't even have to play. Like, don't even suit up, because that's the way that you keep him from telling Vogel, nah, I'm good. Like, just sit out. We can make sure that it's not a national game so that Adam Silver doesn't get mad at us. But that's theoretically what they should do. He should be playing 65 games rather than 77 games and then having, an injury or two. So I think he's his own worst enemy. If they have a plan, I think that's for the best of him. But he's such a competitor, and that he wants to win the MVP. That he thinks like, okay, if I sit 13 games, then my MVP resume doesn't look as impressive as someone like Giannis, who's never going to come out because Giannis is in his mid-20s. If you are telling me that LeBron is not going to care about that stuff, he's only going to care about extending his career, winning the title, I would agree that he could extend his career even more. I just wonder, because he's such a competitor, if that is in it. For what I hope there's some degradation this year, because then that'll be better for the Warriors. But I don't wish injury on anybody, not even LeBron, even though we've had to compete with him for the last 6 or 7 years nonstop. Anyways, guys, this was awesome. I would love to check in at a couple different points during the season, and we can continue this conversation. I had a lot of fun with this. Thanks to CJ. Thanks to Andy. Thanks to Scott. I'm Double G. We'll see you when we see you. Peace out.